Hello, friends. Welcome back to another weekly edition of our NBA Insider video live stream notebook right here on the one and only Bleacher Report app. My name is Jake Fischer, your resident insider for all things NBA at Bleacher Report. We are coming to you live Tuesday, December 23rd, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, a couple of weeks away from the February 5th trade deadline, 2 days out from a loaded Christmas Day slate of NBA games. But you guys are here, as always, for the latest and the greatest rumblings from around the early situations on the NBA trade market. And I am coming to you after a trip down to Orlando, where I spoke to dozens of front office executives, several agents, other league personnel who were all around the Orlando Convention Center and the Hyatt Regency on International Drive for the G League Showcase. We've seen some two-way call-ups already. That's the primary order of business for why front office folks are down in Orlando, to watch G League teams, to see these prospects of who they want to play on a two-way deal, on a 10-day contract. But a lot of them are really there to start talking trade, start talking shop, and see who could become available. And the biggest elephant in the room throughout the long, winding, carpeted hallways of the Orlando Convention Center around the court was definitely what will happen in Milwaukee. We've been talking about it for weeks now on the show. You've been reading about it on my joint Substack effort with the Hall of Famer Mark Stein, the Stein line at markstein.substack.com. We are all waiting to see whether or not the Milwaukee Bucks are going to finally actually put Giannis on the trade block. But I can tell you with absolute certainty that for now in Orlando, every single team, they were told from Bucks people that the Bucks are looking to be buyers, that they want to go out and get a big piece, a major addition that can help Milwaukee compete back in the top of the Eastern Conference with Giannis Antetokounmpo, as they've done for the better part of a decade now. So that is their stance. And as long as the Bucks are looking to go shopping and add to Giannis, as opposed to put him on the market and sell him to the highest bidder, all these teams from Miami, who is the one that always seems to be linked as a very plausible Giannis suitor and landing spot if he does end up becoming on the open market. New York is a spot he wanted to go to this summer. Everyone else around the league who would surely want to go and get involved in a Giannis trade sweepstakes, they all have to wait, because Milwaukee is going to try to see what they can do with their limited asset pool. They're probably only going to be limited to players who are making right around Kyle Kuzma's salary, because in theory they could package together Kuzma and Bobby Portis or Miles Turner and really use a combination of money to go get any type of matching salary. But the Bucks wouldn't want to, I think, mortgage multiple rotation pieces in order to go get better. So there are limited options on the market right now as of like upper echelon all-star level talent that could theoretically come in and really boost Milwaukee's ceilings. And that is why you're hearing that Milwaukee is calling on Zach LaVine, that they have interest in Portland's Jeremy Grant, guys who are considered to be playing on overvalued contracts, on contracts that are above market value, that maybe their incumbent team would want to get off of that player. So I think that's part of why the Bucks are canvassing the league and potentially considering those types of players, because they don't have any second round draft picks to trade, and their first unencumbered first round pick that they can move doesn't come until 2031. So they are going to be very limited on what their optionality is to actually get better. And that is why a lot of teams are still holding on hope that maybe they will come around to moving him, or maybe they'll make a trade early and they'll still end up trading him come February 5th. I'm seeing in the chat from Jeremy Butler, Giannis to Cleveland, question mark. That's an interesting one because the Cavs have absolutely free fallen from the top of the Eastern Conference where they were expected to be. They have the largest payroll in the league. They're in the second apron. So for Cleveland to make any type of move, that they'd have to put together the salary to match Giannis's some $50 million. They'd have to make a first move first to get out of the second apron. But I wonder if the more Cleveland is not finding themselves in the conversation with Detroit and New York and now Boston at the top of the East, how aggressive would they start to become? We've already heard some questions about Kenny Atkinson's job security, even though I don't think, and I'm not anticipating that there'll be a change there. Maybe there will be some type of drastic change to come on the Cavaliers roster. Who's to say for now? It is still just Tuesday, December 23rd, several weeks to go before the February 5th trade buzzer. Giannis to New York, B. Perry 12 says for sure. You know, the Knicks would need to mortgage several rotation pieces as well to get to Giannis's salary. I don't know if actually trading for Giannis really does benefit New York as much as the idea seems to be on paper. They just had that fun run to the NBA Cup. They are as perennial a powerhouse as any team that has been in the East for the last couple of years now. Do you really want to give up two of Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Karl-Anthony Towns to get to that salary figure? I don't really know. Zeke1534 says, could Memphis help Miami facilitate that Giannis trade? I don't really see Memphis playing facilitator right now. I think the Grizzlies are just trying to evaluate their own group and to see what they need to do. I have not heard the Grizzlies at this juncture as a third team trade facilitator. That's mostly been Brooklyn, and Detroit has some flexibility to do that as well. Let's get back to our regularly scheduled programming here, because Hit and Leaf wrote in the chat, Harden to the Rockets with a question mark. And there are definitely a lot of rival teams and veteran front office executives who are looking at the Clippers and looking at the Clippers struggle at the bottom of the Western Conference, and they are preparing for the chance that James Harden could become available for trade between now and February 5th. The Clippers, to be clear, the Clippers are saying, and they're not hesitating in saying that they are not looking to move James Harden. They are not looking to move Ivica Zubac. That they are not looking to be sellers right now. That's been the Clippers' stance for this entire rocky start to this season. But the same thing with, Toronto wanting to wait to see how aggressive to be, or Chicago wanting to figure out where exactly they fall in the NBA hierarchy. We're still six-ish weeks away. There's still a roughly 20 game sample size between now and the trade deadline, that if you go 5-15, if you go 10-10 compared to 15-5, that's going to swing a lot of these teams' decisions. And that's why we're hearing, these teams want to evaluate their group and what have you, because the standings are so bunched up. In the East especially, it's considered so wide open that no one really wants to commit to one direction or the other if they are kind of teetering in both a winning or a tanking, rebuilding kind of path here. So for the Clippers, Ty Lue just said it in a press conference that they're hoping to go 35-20 the rest of the way. The Clippers are not giving up hope that they are going to be able to sneak their way into the play-in conversation and then get back into the playoff picture altogether. James Harden's playing really damn well. That's why there are teams who think that he could be available for trade to begin with, because there are going to be teams that are interested in him. So we're going to keep a close eye on this. I'm going to keep making calls about Harden between now and the 5th. At this point, the Clippers don't want to move him, but they're absolutely rival executives, agents, people around the league who are tapped into this stuff, who are preparing for James Harden to be available. And if so, it'll be interesting because he's got this player option for next season, but it's only guaranteed for $13 million. So there's some optionality for risk and for lack of risk and what have you for a team to take on his contract compared to anyone that's got future money. Someone like Trae Young, who's got a player option for next season. That would be a fully guaranteed full boat if he picks that up. For Harden, it's kind of more of a middle ground for that, whether it's the Clippers or whatever team trades for him. His incumbent team by year end, his option is flexible and creative, and that it's only guaranteed for $13 million for the 26-27 campaign. So that could also increase the likelihood and the eagerness for other teams to go out and want to pursue James Harden as well. God Prince from the very beginning wanted to know Warriors trade rumors, please. I wrote about it this morning at the Stein line. The number one thing to look out for Golden State remains what the Warriors can ultimately do with Jonathan Kuminga's $22.5 million salary. He's obviously fallen completely out of the rotation. There was a minute there in the middle of December when he sat 3 straight games where a lot of teams were kind of raising an eyebrow and wondering, is Jonathan Kuminga ever going to play for the Warriors again? He got 9 minutes the other night against Phoenix, went right back to a DNP after that, so we'll see. But there is a ton of benefit and incentive for both Golden State and Jonathan Kuminga to make sure that he remains healthy in order to be eligible for trade and have an opportunity to play his way into his next team, picking up his team option for the following season. So that is the situation in Golden State. What can Jonathan Kuminga ultimately bring back the Warriors? That is where the Warriors are primarily focused right now. And it might be dependent upon which teams are interested in Kuminga, but I could see Golden State getting inventive. At one point in time, the Jimmy Butler trade was supposed to be a 6-team trade that was going to involve Toronto. It ended up not. It was just a 5-team trade. But the Warriors are practiced in figuring out multi-team deals to make their February trade deadline blockbuster come to fruition. So I would not necessarily limit Golden State's options to what they can do with Jonathan Kuminga to just trading him somewhere where he wants to go and getting something back of value for him. There's a way, especially with Sacramento having interest in him dating back to the summer, and the Kings expected to be the biggest clear-cut seller on the market. Could there be a 3-way scenario or a 4-team, another multi-team deal that comes together there? Certainly possible. So don't just limit what the Warriors could get back for Kuminga to teams that have Kuminga interest. There's absolutely opportunity to expand that into a multi-team situation as well. Joe Mar 44 asks for any Orlando trade rumors, and I really haven't heard anything new right now, but I'll say with Orlando, people are still wondering about what they will do with Jonathan Isaac and the fact that his contract is rather large for someone who's not routinely in their rotation. He's behind both Wendell Carter and Goga Bitadze in their center rotation. So there's something that should crack there, being that Orlando has major financial ramifications moving forward, having extended all their guys internally and then traded for Desmond Bane. They're going to have a very expensive tax bill and just overall cap sheet moving forward. So they're looking at ways, to my understanding, at lowering that damage moving forward. We'll get back to the chat in a little bit, but let's get back to our rundown here, because if you haven't been paying attention, the Boston Celtics are right back in the thick of things at the top of the East. Entering yesterday's games, they were 17-11 in third place. That was before a comeback victory where Jaylen Brown and Boston overcame a 20-point deficit to Indiana last night. They're now 18-11, and they've got some real optionality with Anthony Simons and his $27 million contract and what he could potentially bring Boston back as an outgoing salary math matching piece. I'd say there's a couple of things to keep an eye on for the Celtics. Number one, they already showcased this all throughout last summer, how they wanted to cut salary. They could simply just look to do that. They could simply just look to move Anthony Simons in a deal that got them under the luxury tax altogether and set up the Celtics to avoid being repeater tax teams for the foreseeable future. However, this team's pretty good. They had the DNA left over of the 2024 NBA champions, and they have a clear, obvious gap in the front court that they could seemingly address and really stand to benefit from adding another major piece to this rotation. Could they do all that in one? Could they move Anthony Simons, get a center, and somehow end up below the luxury tax? That would be, I think, just check, 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 checking off all the boxes that Brad Stevens' front office is looking at in their early findings and research and due diligence on this trade market. But that could be easier said than done, just being that Anthony Simons does make pushing $30 million. And to get a center who makes around 15 million, who's going to really move the trade needle, but have a team on the other side be able to take back that type of salary, that's going to be a little tricky. It is beneficial for Boston in general, just having Anthony Simons on their roster, and for everyone who would potentially be taking him back, that he's an expiring contract. So there's some future savings right around the corner for him. But I'm not seeing such clear cut, like, for example, if Brooklyn were to take back Anthony Simons for Nick Claxton, the Nets have the space to do that. But the Nets are one of the very few teams in the league that actually have cap space to absorb incoming salary above what they're sending out the door. So that might be one of their only few options to do so. I'm not saying that the Celtics have called Nick Claxton and there's been direct conversation between Brooklyn and Boston, but that's just one option in theory on the board, because we do know that the Nets are open for business. They're willing to be a facilitator in 3-team deals, and they have veterans like Nick Claxton and Michael Porter Jr. and what have you that they are definitely willing to listen on and hoping to receive more draft capital for, just like they did with Dennis Schroeder a year ago, just like they did with ultimately flipping Cam Johnson to Denver to bring back Michael Porter Jr. to get that unprotected Nuggets pick in the summer. So Brooklyn will be open for various types of deals. I think they're looking to make some deals. They've been very active over the last couple of years, dating back to trading Kevin Durant to Phoenix and then flipping Mikal Bridges to New York and what have you. So that's something that I'm keeping my eye on. But to bring it back to Boston, there's going to be limited options, I think, for them to flip Simons to some situation that brings back a center and also gets Boston below the tax. So that, I think, points to the Celtics just looking to get better. And why wouldn't they? They're the 3 seed in the East right now. They still have Jaylen Brown. They still have Derek White. They still have Peyton Pritchard. And they're really getting strong performances up front from Neemias Queta. But one more center, one more legitimate front court piece could really do some damage for Boston in this wide open Eastern Conference. Hector Chavez wants to know if the Spurs could go out and get one more piece, and is suggesting that San Antonio looks at Trey Murphy III. Maybe San Antonio trades Jeremy Sohan, Harrison Barnes, and 2 first-round picks for Trey Murphy III. Now, the Pelicans are claiming that they're going to need way more than that to part with Trey Murphy. They're going to want a Desmond Bane type package in order to part with Trey Murphy. And the Pelicans have just won 4 straight games. So at this point in time, I am starting to believe that Trey Murphy and Herb Jones really are not going to be available, despite how much interest there's going to be and has been in them from around the league. But on the flip side, I don't really know why San Antonio would want to do that. I think the Spurs, who are now 21-7 and have one of the best defenses in the league after a strong run to the NBA Cup with Victor Wembanyama back healthy, Steph Castle and Dylan Harper and De'Aaron Fox all healthy. I don't see the need for San Antonio to push chips into the table after doing so for Fox a year ago and spending limited draft capital. They're not like in a draft pick crunch like certain teams, but you only get 1 pick every year and you only have a certain, cache of more picks to come. Why use them on a wing player who doesn't necessarily come in right now and is absolutely definitively a starter in their front court, better than Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson have been absolutely playing up to their first round, lottery level talent this season. So I don't really see San Antonio making really an aggressive move like that. Zeke wants to know, is Memphis a landing spot for Larry Markkinen? I don't think Larry Markkinen is going to be available for trade this year at all. I've said that on here in past weeks, and that's still my stance after talking to some people around the situation in Orlando this past weekend. I think the Jazz want to build around Larry Markkinen. They've got cap space to play with next summer, and they absolutely want to use it and be a major player, whether that's via trade or free agency. So the Jazz, I think, are far more focused on adding and not selling. And I am not expecting Larry Markkinen to be available, even though he would be a very interesting fit between Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. in Memphis. Speaking of Ja and Trae Young, those are two of the major point guard names that when you call up any front office executive, they are listing as potential guys who could be made available for trade. Now, just like James Harden and just like LaMelo Ball in Charlotte, their current teams are all saying, we're not looking to move those guys right now. I think of Harden, Ja Morant, LaMelo Ball, and Trae Young, I think Trae Young is the most likely of all of those players to actually be moved, being that his situation in Atlanta has really just passed him by. This has become Jalen Johnson's team, and there is a total youth movement right now in Atlanta. Although Dyson Daniels is having just a terrible shooting season, it really has terrible is the word. There's no way to be cute or soft or nice about it. He's shooting like 18% from three, if that, the last I checked. And Trae Young also was eligible for extension this past summer, and there was no talk there at all. So all those dots would seem to suggest that Trae Young, of those big point guard names, Harden, Morant, LaMelo Ball, that Trae Young, to me, and that's me kind of giving my opinion based off of what I'm hearing, but also I think if you called up 10 front office executives right now and you asked them who's the most likely to get traded of all those guys, it'd be Trae. I really do believe that. On the other hand, I think if you asked a lot of those executives that question, a lot of them would also say the greatest likelihood of one of those guys getting moved would be for one of those other guys. Similar to John Wall being traded for Russell Westbrook back in the day. So it'll be interesting to see which of those guys actually does become available. There's plenty of big name guys that we are monitoring from those dudes, and I think the biggest name of all, not named Giannis Antetokounmpo, is Anthony Davis, of course, who, look, I spoke to various people about this in Orlando. The Mavericks are not just looking to sell Anthony Davis, and they're not just looking to be bad. They did that a year ago, too, if you recall. The Mavericks were even speaking the company line of the fact that they didn't tank down the stretch and they've, played ethical basketball and blah, blah, blah. That was why they got blessed by the lottery gods and got the number one pick. That they were rewarded jumping up in an absolute unlikely scenario from the 10th spot all the way to number one for Cooper Flag, that it was some gift from the basketball gods about rewarding people valuing the sanctity of competition and whatnot. And Dallas is still in that position right now. So until other teams call up Dallas and make a real aggressive move for Anthony Davis, I don't think we're going to see any real chatter there, because from my conversations around the league, teams like Atlanta and Toronto and Chicago that have called about Anthony Davis, they want to get him at a bargain. They want to see if they can get him for cheap. And that's not what Dallas has any interest in doing. They want to sell him for the type of value that Nico Harrison thought he was worth when he traded him for Luka Doncic. Traded for him for Luka Doncic. So we'll see what ultimately stands in that trade sweepstakes. But for now, he's playing very well. The Mavs have been more competitive of late, and maybe that will boost his market overall. The Kings veteran trio of Domantas Sabonis, Zach LaVine, and DeMar DeRozan are right there in this crew as well, of big names that could potentially be moved. I think with Sabonis, it's getting trickier and trickier the longer he's been out due to injury. And it seems like with the latest update there, he's going to be out another month before getting reevaluated. So we're staring at a scenario where Domantas Sabonis does not play again until February 5th. And it's just going to be hard for another team to be willing to send out the 40 some $1 million in salary and take on his future money with a guy approaching the end of his prime and facing an injury and not really seeing what he looks like right now. I just saw in the chat someone asking about Wolves rumors. Minnesota, I'll tell you, is the team that I heard from most executives when I asked them in Orlando about who's the team you're looking at making a big move, because the Wolves have put a lot of bait in the water that they are looking for point guard help, and because of that, I'm putting Julius Randle in as our last name on this segment of big names who could be moved, because if the Wolves do want to go call up Memphis about John Morant or Atlanta about Trae Young or even James Harden in Minnesota, which I don't really see the Harden fit next to Anthony Edwards so much. I think the Wolves want more of like a table setter, floor general than a pick and roll maestro that Harden is. Next to Anthony Edwards, they want more of a complementary playmaker than someone who's ball dominant like that. But to get to that type of salary, you're going to have to part with Naz Reid or Julius Randle. The Wolves do not want to move Jaden McDaniels, nor should they. He's having an incredible, incredible season. He's flirting with a 50, 40, 90 year at 25 years old after being an all-defensive player. He is turning into like legit Scottie Pippen type second banana next to Anthony Edwards. So I think if you're going to get in the mix for someone who's making 30, 40 million for Minnesota, just by process of elimination, you're going to have to part with one of Julius Randle and Naz Reid. And with Julius Randle, part of why Minnesota valued him so much in the trade that sent out Karl-Anthony Towns was his additional playmaking, ball handling abilities to kind of fit the same situation. The Wolves have been looking at finding more ball handling, more creation next to Ant since their first Western Conference Finals run. So he'd kind of become a bit redundant if the Wolves were going out and making a major move like that. So that's why I have Julius Randle on trade watch at this juncture. Ghost 316 says, do I think Houston will trade for a point guard? I just had a call with someone today who would know, who said to me that the Rockets are not actively involved in anything right now. And to round out our chat before our final topic here, Cal Betsina asked for MPJ rumors. And I really haven't heard of any teams that are calling us specifically about Michael Porter Jr., but I'll just put some educated speculation out right now. If Milwaukee is truly looking at any type of game-changing talent that could come in and really help support Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's on a considered negative contract, I guarantee you Michael Porter Jr.'s name is on some whiteboard somewhere in the Bucks front office. It just has to be, because he's not going to cost anything near what hypothetically someone like Trey Murphy would cost you in New Orleans. So that's just one piece of dot connecting that I'm happy to say publicly and risk being aggregated and have this clip be posted on Twitter. So there you go. Our final topic of today, new tanking rules, which came out reporting today from ESPN about the league running some ideas by the board of governors and all 30 team owners about amending the tanking situation. And I think what's interesting is, to my understanding, this is coming more out of a reaction to the gambling probes from Terry Rozier and Damon Jones and Chauncey Billups and what have you than anything else, because the league and now the federal government are very focused on maintaining and preserving the object of competition. And that's why you already saw a memo last week about the league rolling out new policies for reporting player injuries for game status. And that's kind of where this trickles into. I don't think the league cares about teams rebuilding and playing young guys. What they care about are veteran players resting with questionable load management injuries. And they don't want a little ankle sprain to keep a player out for 15 games and have them miss all of March. So that's why you saw, as first reported by ESPN today, that there was even an idea kicked around about locking lottery positions as early as March 1st. They're talking about the possibility of teams not being allowed to pick in the top 4 multiple years in a row. And you're talking about limiting lottery protections because there's some weird situations where, like the Jazz, for example, right now, if the Jazz end up a couple of games around the 8th spot in the lottery standings, their pick is top 8 protected going to OKC. So won't they try to finagle the situation with resting guys due to back tightness or a stubbed big toe in order to lose a game to make sure they keep their pick? That's the type of stuff the league cares about. They do not care about a team trading off their veterans and entering a multi-year rebuild and stuff like that. What they really want to care about and eliminate is teams trading away players and then resting players and completely like just ignoring any value in games in March and April. They want real competition. They want teams putting out their fullest, healthiest lineup on a night-to-night basis. And that's where a lot of this is more focused as opposed to like that more macro. Back in the Sixers process days, they were far more concerned about the look of that, a multi-year rebuild type thing. I think from my calls, it seems far more pertinent for the NBA at this juncture to eliminate the questionable injury stuff on a night-to-night basis, which certainly ends up impacting gambling odds and lines and parlay bets and all that type of stuff. So that will do it for today's NBA Insider Video Live Stream Notebook. We really appreciate all of the chat questions. I'm sorry I could not get to all of them, but come back next week, next Tuesday. I guess that's going to be January. No, it'll still be December. It'll be December 30th. Come back for another NBA Insider Video Live Stream Notebook, and we will get to as many chat questions as we can then. For now, Merry Christmas. Enjoy a loaded 5-game NBA slate on Thursday, and enjoy whatever NBA news and notes, rumors you're going to be getting push alerted from your Bleacher Report app between now and the next time I see you here. Take care. See you guys.